The thaw came late that year. Snow still crouched in the folds of the hills like something afraid to leave. The sky hung low, a wool-colored blanket that pressed down on the land and those left alive upon it. At the far edge of Dry Creek, where the dirt road bled into prairie grass and scrub, the widow Carver stood at the threshold of a sagging cabin with the wind clawing at her shawl. She didn't flinch, not when the wind whipped dust into her eyes, not when her boy coughed behind her, thin and tight like a dry hinge. Not when the door blew open again for the third time that morning and slammed against the wall with the sharp, broken-tooth sound of splintered wood. She had buried her husband in November. Snow fell the day they lowered him down. Nobody from town came except the preacher, and he was already drunk. They'd stood by the grave in silence, just her and the two boys, both too young to understand death but old enough to feel its weight. She had spoken no words. There were none that mattered. Now for months later, there was hardly any food, less wood, and nothing left to sell. The roof leaked in 3 places. The cow had dried up, and Eli, her youngest, hadn't walked since the fever took him in February. The woman looked out across the white-capped prairie, where the wind bowed the grass like it was praying for something. She felt it then, the great silence of the world. Not peace, not grace. Just the indifference of land and sky to whether she lived or died. She turned back inside. The floor creaked under her step. Sam sat near the hearth with a stick and an empty coffee can, poking at the ash like it might come back to life. Eli lay under the patched quilt too quiet, too still. There had been a time she thought about sending word to her brother in Illinois. He'd written once, a long letter with flourishes and promises, but she'd burned it. That was before they were hungry, before winter stretched into spring like it had something to prove. A knock came at the door, then soft, unsure. She didn't startle. Hunger and grief had already taken the edge off most fear. She opened it slow. There stood a man, or what was left of one. Dust covered him like a second skin. His coat was torn across one shoulder. His horse behind him looked nearly as ragged, bone thin and bleeding from the flank. The stranger touched the brim of his hat. "Mum," he said, voice hoarse like Hed swallowed smoke. "Begging pardon, but I could use a bit of water. Just a drink for me and the mare, if it's not too much a bother." She didn't answer right away, just stared, her jaw set tight. The wind pushed past them both as if trying to get through the door. Finally she stepped aside. Only just. The man hesitated, then nodded once and led his horse around to the trough. She watched as he poured the last of his own canteen for the animal before taking any for himself. He stood like a man with old wounds, careful in the way he moved, like each motion cost something. She waited. He drank. The horse nicked red low and leaned against the post. "You headed somewhere?" she asked, her voice dry and low. He looked up, wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "I was. North toward Miles City. Thought there might be work. Mule train or cattle drive." "You're lost then?" "Seems so." A long pause stretched out between them, filled only by the creak of wood and the whistle of wind between boards. "You got a name?" she asked finally. He gave a tired smile, faint and lopsided. "Cole. Just Cole'll do." She nodded once, then turned her back on him. Left. The door opened behind her. He followed. Inside, the fire was down to embers. Cole paused at the threshold like he didn't belong there, like he knew the shape of grief too well to intrude on someone else's without asking. The widow moved past him, knelt near the hearth and stirred the coals. A flicker caught and grew into a soft flame. She added a piece of the last pine log without looking at him. He stood quiet, eyes on the two boys. One watched him with a mixture of suspicion and hunger, though neither showed on his face. The other didn't stir beneath the quilt. "Sit," she said, motioning to the chair near the stove. It was the one her husband used to sit in, long evenings with his back to her and a bottle in his lap. She didn't care anymore. Cole sat stiff, careful not to lean too hard. His hands looked raw, scabbed along the knuckles. There was a silence that settled between them again, not empty, but not yet friendly. "What happened to the horse?" she asked. "Barbed wire. Was crossing open country. Didn't see it till too late." He paused. "Chest stuff. Got more grit than I do most days." She nodded. "Name?" "Addie." The boy near the hearth said it soft, almost a whisper. Annie's a good name. Cole looked over at him, eyes softening. Yeah, she's a good girl. The widow poured what little cornmeal they had into a pot, added water, stirred. It wasn't enough for 3, let alone 4. Still, she didn't say. Hunger was its own kind of silence. You were a soldier? She asked, watching the way he favored one leg. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the fire. Once. Not proud of it. That's not what I asked. No. It ain't. She didn't press. The wind howled against the walls again. The youngest boy stirred, face pale and thin. She crossed the room and sat beside him, laid a hand on his brow. Still warm. Too warm. Cole looked around, eyes catching on the cracks in the wall, the lean of the roof, the coat draped over the window like it might keep out the cold. His voice came low. This place wasn't built to hold for winters. No, she said. It was. Your husband. How long's he been gone? Buried him in the snow late fall. Was it heart or the drink? Maybe both. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was mean when he drank, and he always drank. Another silence. The kind where nothing needed to be said because truth had already made itself known. I can fix the trough, he offered, and the roof's slouching on the west side. If you got nails, I can try and straighten it. She glanced at him, not suspicious, just tired. Why? He shrugged. Seems like you could use a hand. I could use a miracle, she said. Well, he said, easing up from the chair with a grunt. I ain't that, but I can drive a nail. She watched him walk out, limping slightly. When the door shut behind him, she looked at her boys, then back at the pot bubbling thin on the fire. Outside, the wind pressed against the cabin like it wanted him. Inside, something shifted. Small, quiet, like the first melt of ice on the edge of the eaves. The trail grows quieter but not empty. Subscribe. By midday, the wind had eased. A brutal calm settled over the land, the kind that came just after a storm or before another. Cole spent the morning working without a word. He patched the trough, braced the slumped side of the porch, and climbed up on the roof with rusted nails he pulled from a broken crate behind the shed. She watched him from the window while stripping rags for Ella's fever. The man moved like someone who'd learned pain by heart slow but sure, hands steady, no waste in his effort. He spoke to the horse sometimes, just soft things, like he was used to being quiet all the way. The mare leaned her head into his shoulder like she knew more about him than anyone had a right to. By the time he came back inside, sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. He peeled off his coat and sat by the hearth without asking. Sam edged closer. Did you ever shoot a bandit? The boy asked, eyes wide but voice small, like the words might vanish before they landed. Cole gave a dry smile. I shot men, but not all of them were bandits. The boy blinked, unsure how to answer. I don't like talking about it, Cole added, quieter. Most of it weren't worth remembering. The widow handed him a cup of water and said nothing. The steam from the pot was beginning to smell like food, even if it wasn't much more than hot mush. Still, it was warm, and there was salt in it. She sat down across from him. You got kin? She asked. He shook his head. Had a sister once. She married and moved east. Haven't seen her since the war. Any place you'd go if you could. He thought a moment, ran a hand through his hair. Never thought about it. I've been in so many places that never asked me to stay. I figured maybe that's what I was good at leaving. The widow stirred the pot, voice low. Seems like you're still here. Yeah, he said. I guess I am. They ate in silence, all but the sound of spoons scraping bowls. When they were done, the widow took Eli in her arms and rocked him gently. His fever had broken just slightly. His breath didn't rattle so loud. She closed her eyes just for a moment, let herself feel the boy's weight. Cole watched. You could leave, she said without looking at him. I know, but you haven't. No. Why? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because you opened your door. She opened her eyes then, looked right at him. That ain't much, she said. He nodded. It's more than I've had in a long time. For a long while there was only the pop of firewood and the whistle of wind through the eaves. Then Sam said, You think the snow's really done? No, Cole said. But that means spring won't come anyway. The widow didn't smile, not exactly, but something softened in her face just enough to catch the light. That night, he slept in the shed, on straw that still smelled faintly of summer. The mare slept close, and the wind held off. Inside the cabin, the fire didn't die down, and for the first time in months, the children slept straight through. In the dark, the widow lay awake. She listened to the wind outside and the slow, quiet breathing of her boys, and she thought of the man in the shed, not with longing, not yet, but with something close to wondering. The days stretched out one after the next, stitched together by work and silence. Cole rose before sunup and split wood, hauled water, walked the fence line when there wasn't enough fence left to walk. The widow didn't ask for his help, and he didn't wait for permission. She watched how he moved through the land like he belonged to it, not in the proud way of landowners or cow hands, but in the quiet, beaten-down way of someone who knew what it meant to survive only because the earth hadn't yet decided to shake him off. By the end of the week, the boys followed him like pups. Sam asked 100 questions a day. Cole answered maybe 10. The rest he left for the boy to figure out, or offered a half-shrug and a glint of humor in his tired eyes. Eli started walking again, slow and shaky, with Cole's hand bracing him now and then. They never made much of it. No celebration. Just a shared nod. And then Eli kept walking. One morning the widow came out with a bundle of laundry under one arm and a shovel in the other. "Ground soft enough," she said, eyes on the hard stretch of dirt behind the house. "I can get the garden started if it holds." Cole took the shovel from her hand without a word and began digging. She didn't argue, just dropped to her knees and started clearing rocks. After a while she said, "My name's Ruth." He paused, looked over at her. "I know. You never asked. You never said." They kept working. By late afternoon, she had dirt under her nails, sweat at her collar, and a sunburn blooming across her cheekbone. Cole looked about the same. They sat side by side on the porch steps, sharing a tin cup of water between them. She said, "When I first married, I thought this land would make a home. I thought if we worked it hard enough, if we held on through winter and drought, I'd give something back." He listened. "It didn't," she said. "Not really." "No," Cole said, "but you're still here." She looked out across the prairie. The wind was mild that day, soft enough to let the grass stand upright for once. He asked, "Why do you stay?" She shook her head. "I got two boys and nowhere else to go." "That's a reason to survive," he said, "but it ain't the same as living." She looked at him long, like she was trying to see something buried beneath years of dust and scar. "And what would you know about the difference?" He didn't answer right away, just leaned forward for arms on his knees. "When I left the army, I wandered. Didn't know what I was looking for. I worked drives, guarded freight, lived due to tents and saloons. Thought maybe if I kept moving, I wouldn't have to carry it all. Did it work?" He shook his head. "A weight comes with you, always." They sat quiet again. Then she said, "I used to play piano, back in Missouri before I was married. My mother said it made me too proud. She sold it for train fare when Pa died." He looked at her, surprised. "I can't imagine you ever being too proud." She smiled, faint and crooked. "Well, I was young. Thought I'd marry someone who built me a house with a parlor just for it." "You got a parlor now," he said, glancing back at the leaning walls. "Sort of." That made her laugh. It was short, hoarse from disuse, but real. The sound startled her. She hadn't heard herself laugh in over a year. They didn't touch, didn't lean close or speak anything soft. But when they went inside that night, something had settled in the space between them. Not yet trust, not quite hope, but a thing that'd wait. Something neither of them had asked for and neither of them wanted to lose. In the shed, Cole lay awake long after dark, staring up through the slats in the roof. He listened to the low breath of the mare and the faint sounds of the house behind him. Inside, Ruth sat by the fire, sewing a tear in Ella's coat. The thread was too thin and the needle too dull, but her hands moved steady. She wasn't waiting for anything, but she noticed that she wasn't dreading tomorrow anymore. Trouble came in the form of a wagon. It rolled up one morning just after first light, creaking and spitting dust as it came down the hill from town. Ruth was inside with the boys, boiling water for washing. Cole had gone out early, checking the west fence. The sound of wheels on gravel brought her to the doorway. She knew the wagon. It belonged to Deputy Frank Kemper. He pulled up slow, horse snorting, reins slack in his hand. He didn't tip his hat or step down, just stayed seated like a man who knew he was welcome. "Ruth," he said. She didn't answer. "I heard you took in a drifter. Fellow with a limp and no papers. That true?" Still she said nothing, just crossed her arms and stared. Kemper sighed, leaned his elbows on his knees. "Look, I ain't trying to cause trouble, but folks talk. Town's uneasy. Man like that, no background, no name beyond a first. His name's Cole. All right, Cole. Still, you know what happened over in Fallon County. Farm wife took in a stranger. Week later, she and her kids turned up dead in the well. That man was from Fallon," she said. "Cole came from the south." Kemper frowned like he didn't like being corrected. "Even so, you got two boys in there. You ought to be careful." "I've been careful every day since my husband died. Nobody came to check on me then." He shifted in his seat, looked down at his gloves. "I'm just saying, Ruth, if HES trouble, it'll be on your head." Her jaw tightened. "HES fixed the fence, the roof, the trough. He got my son walking again. That don't mean HES safe." "No," she said, "but HES kind." Kemper watched her a long moment. "You got a mean streak when you're pushed, you know that?" "I've earned it." He grunted, flicked the reins. The wagon turned slow and rolled back the way it came, dust trailing behind like a warning. Cole returned before noon, quiet as ever. Ruth didn't mention the deputy. Not right away. They worked in the field, raking dry brush, burning what woodland rot. Later, she told him. He didn't flinch, just nodded and went back to stacking kindly. "You've been run off before," she said. "Many times. You gonna run now?" "No." She looked at him hard. "Why not?" He met her gaze steady. "Because you didn't ask me to leave." That night, the boys were asleep early. The air had turned mild. Ruth stood outside near the edge of the porch, watching the stars blink into view like shy animals creeping from the trees. Cole joined her. "He won't be the last," she said. "No," he agreed. "They'll press harder, talk more. They might lie. I know. I've already lost enough, Cole." He turned toward her. "You want me gone?" "No." "Then I'll stay." The wind moved through the grass like a hand brushing velvet. The land for once felt like it was listening. He stood beside her, not touching, not speaking, but present. And in that silence, something settled deep inside her. Not safety, not yet, but the beginning of something that might be coming. The deputy came back 3 days later, this time with 2 men behind him, both armed. They stayed on their horses, faces flattened unreadable. The sun was high, but the wind had teeth that morning, and the dust came up in little snarls between the hoof rips. Ruth stood in the yard, apron still on, hands balled into fists at her sides. Cole came from the barn slow, wiping his palms on a rag. He didn't say anything, just stood beside her. Kemper didn't get down. "You were warned," he said. "I remember," Ruth said. "I've got a judge's note here. Says, if he can't prove who he is, he can't squat on this land. Not even in your barn." "This land ain't yours to rule," she said. "It's mine." He held out a folded slip of paper. She didn't take it. "HES not hurting anyone," she added. "HES done more good out here than any of you did all winter." Kemper gave a slow shake of his head. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You come to drag him off?" "Not if he goes quiet." Ruth turned to Cole, but he was already stepping forward. No defiance, just calm. "You'll go," he said. "You won't," Ruth snapped. Cole looked at her, and for the first time since he showed up, there was something close to pain in his face. "If I stay, they'll keep coming. They'll make it worse." "I don't care." "I do." One of the deputy's men spit into the dirt. "I ain't nobody worth this much trouble." Cole's eyes never left hers. "I need to go into town. Talk to someone I know. He'll come back." "You sure?" "No," he said. "But I'm tired of running." The next morning, Cole rode out on Annie, saddle cinched tight. coat patched into light for the wind. Ruth packed him a sack of bread and dried meat without saying much. When she handed it to him, her hands lingered on the strap. "If they don't let you come back," she said, "he'll come find you." He smiled, but there was nothing easy in it. "He'll be back." He meant it. The days after he left passed slow and heavy. The boys asked questions. Ruth didn't have answers. She worked the field with a vengeance, shoulders aching each night. At dusk, she'd sit out by the road and watch the line of the hills for a shape she knew too well. A week passed, then 9 days, then 10. On the 11th day, just before supper, a figure appeared at the horizon. Ruth stood without thinking. The boys ran past her, kicking up dust. She didn't run. She waited, hands still in her apron, breath tight in her chest. Cole rode in like a man who'd seen something break and not look away from it. When he dismounted, she saw his hands were scraped, and there was blood dried at the corner of his shirt. His jaw was bruised. "When I swollen?" She didn't ask. He looked at her, almost sheepish. "I found a man I used to serve with," he said. "Signed a paper. Said I was who I said I was. Put his name to it." "And the deputy?" Cole shrugged. "I gave him the paper. Told him next time he comes out here, it better be with food or tools, not threats." Ruth stared at him. "Was that all right?" he asked. She stepped forward, slow. Then she reached up and touched his cheek, just lightly, just once. "That's more than all right," she said. The boys clung to his arms, talking over each other, showing him every scrap of work they'd done while he was gone. That night they ate together. No empty place at the table, no fear pressing in. When Ruth lay down, she slept without waking, without waiting for footsteps that never came. And outside, the wind passed by the house without touching it. Spring took its time. The thaw came in fits, warm mornings, followed by nights cold enough to freeze the water bucket left out on the stoop. But the world was waking. Shoots of grain pushed up stubborn through frost-hardened earth, and the river started running faster, louder, as if remembering what it was made for. Cole stayed. He never said it plain, never made a show of it. But he moved like a man who no longer meant to drift. He built a new chicken coop with salvaged timber from the collapsed shed out back. He taught Sam how to mend harness straps, how to tell when a cloud meant train or trouble. With Eli, he was softer, less words, more gestures. A hand on the back, a steadying touch when the boy's legs trembled. Ruth watched all of it with a careful heart. She didn't speak of the future, not yet. But some mornings she caught herself humming while she cooked. She braided her hair again, not for anyone, just because it felt like herself again. A self she thought had blown away long ago in some winter storm. One afternoon she came out to find Cole sitting near the fence, sharpening a spade. The boys were off at the creek chasing frogs and coming home wet no matter what she told them. She sat beside him without a word. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked after a while without looking up. "Every day," she said. He nodded. "But I won't," she added. "Not because I'm scared. Just this is the land that knew my children's first steps, my husband's last breath, my worst days, and now maybe my better ones too." He looked at her then. "I don't got much," he said. "No land, no money, just what's in my hands and what I remember. You think I stayed alive all this time for a man with land?" He smiled, just a little. "Still, you deserve more." "I deserve peace," she said. "And the boys deserve someone who doesn't quit." He didn't speak, but his hand was close to hers on the fence rail. Later that week, she caught him sketching something in the dirt with a stick, rough lines, simple marks. "What's that?" she asked. "Barn," he said. "Small one. Enough for Annie and maybe a goat if the boy talks you into it." She stared at the lines. "You thinking of staying that long?" He met her eyes, held them. "I was hoping," he said. She crouched beside him, reached out, and smoothed a line with her finger. Then she drew another one, a porch. A real one, with a post on each end and space for a bench. "That's the part I want," she said. That night they sat outside after the boys had gone to bed, the sky full of stars and no wind at all. She leaned against him, her shoulder against his arm, quiet and natural. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. "You sure?" he asked. "I've been sure for a while," she said. The stars stretched overhead like something eternal, but down on earth, Two people sat side by side, building something out of pieces they thought were too broken to keep, and neither one looked back. Summer came in slow and full. The grass reached knee-high before they could cut it, and the creek sang day and night. The barn rose one beam at a time, not pretty but solid. Cole built it with the boys, Sam measuring planks with a string, Eli hauling nails in a coffee tin, one small fist at a time. Ruth watched from the porch most afternoons, shelling peas or mending shirts, her hands busy and her heart soft. One Sunday they walked to the edge of their land where the cottonwoods grew, and Cole handed Ruth a small cloth bundle. It held no box, no ribbon, just something folded carefully. She opened it and stared. Inside was a ring simple, shaped from a horseshoe nail, polished smooth, bent just right. "I don't tone much," Cole said, quiet, "but I'm offering everything I am." She didn't speak, just slipped it on her finger and looked up at him. "That's a yes," she said. They married a week later, under the same trees, with the boys holding wildflowers in their fists and the mare standing off to the side like a sleepy witness. No preacher came, no neighbors, just them, the wind, and a sky wide enough to bear witness. In the weeks that followed, the talk in town quieted. Kemper didn't come again. Folks had their own troubles. And maybe deep down they knew the widow's place was theirs to judge. Come fall, Ruth found herself humming again while sweeping the porch. The boys grew sun-dark and strong. Eli ran now, not just walked, chasing his brother through the tall grass behind the house. The barn stood upright and proud, and the fence line held. One evening, Cole brought in a carved box he'd made pine, with hinges so smooth it nearly sang when opened. Inside was a pair of leather baby shoes, soft and new. Ruth blinked. "You knew before I told you?" she asked. "I had a hunch," he said, smiling slow. She ran a finger over the tiny shoes, then leaned against his chest, listening to the quiet thump of his heart beneath the worn fabric of his shirt. The cabin didn't lean so much anymore. The roof held. The windows stayed shut against the wind. And when the first snow came soft, barely a whisper, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a blanket. That night, Ruth sat by the fire, Eli curled at her side, Sam reading aloud with care and pride from a warm book. Cole carved something small by the light, just whittling, the sound of blade against wood steady and sure. Her hand found his, warm and rough, and in that moment, she knew the land had given something back after all, not because she'd earned it, but because she'd endured. Stay modded, subscribe, and ride forward.